Well, I'll call the meeting to order at 3:01 on Tuesday, December
21st.
I'm going to take public comment on non-agenda items from anybody. Hearing no public comment, I'll ask for conflicts of interest. Starting with Brian Wheel.
No conflict today, thank you.
Dick Fast.
None, thank you.
Peter Manka.
None.
Bill Shropshire.
None.
Mike Wilcynski there yet?
Not yet.
All right, we'll hit him up when he comes. And it didn't sound like Mike Duquesnoy he's got a little bit of a problem, so to speak.
Correct.
I will move on to the consent agenda. We have the minutes, financial report, and sewer and water operator reports. I have a question for Ron. I noticed on the minutes there's no timestamp.
Yeah, I'm gonna get those on there, replace the clipboard packet.
Great.
Halfway done, they're not fully in there yet.
Does anybody have any questions or comments on the consent agenda items?
And Tom, Mike walked in, he's seated at the table here.
Hi, Mike. You weren't here when we did the conflict of interest. Do you have any conflict of interest on what's on the agenda?
No.
All right. If there's no comments or questions on the consent agenda, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion. Brian Wheeler.
Brian Wheeler made a motion. Do we have a second?
I got it.
It sounded like two people seconded it. It was Mike Wilcynski and Bill Shropshire.
Correct.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All right. With that, we will move on to Rich Chandler and the Yellowstone Club Effluent Storage and Disposal Update.
Rich, why don't you come up? That's it. All right. Why don't you drive?
Thanks, Ron. Thank you, board. Appreciate you gentlemen giving me the time here.
Hey, Ron, we're not getting the screen view. All we see is a view from the camera of you guys.
You see that now?
I got it.
You see that, Tom?
I can.
Yes, also.
You can't?
Yes, I can see it.
Yes.
Very good.
All right, where was I? Ron, board, thanks for giving me the time. Appreciate it, gentlemen. I know there's been some indirect conversations of where YC is on some upgrades to the pond storage facilities. Our snowmaking progress, Spanish Peaks for that matter, and their snowmaking progress. So I thought it would be the right time to give you guys more of a formal update of where we are. Ahead of that, you know, there's probably an opportunity here just to review the why behind this. You guys all are generally familiar with our agreement, but I was going to tap into it a little bit here. You guys recall back in 2001, the developers, i.e. YC, Spanish Peaks, and at the time Lone Moose Meadows, were defined under an agreement as a developer alongside the along with the water sewer district. And in that agreement, the developer needed to create some storage facilities and some disposal opportunities for the treated reclaimed wastewater. So to that agreement, basically stating we needed to store 130 million gallons at full build out annually. And we needed to have the facilities to dispose of 160 million gallons annually. Ron, the water sewer district, they were going to notify us based on their flows of when we needed to create additional facilities for storage. That last phase 3 of that notification was a letter that was sent July 2018 by Ray Armstrong. And that was requesting us to create additional storage of 39.2 million gallons to fulfill that 130 million gallon storage. Okay, so from that time, we worked with the DEQ and our engineers. The first effort toward that was to increase our main storage pond up at YC. That took some time to get through development and approvals, but this last May we began construction on that. That pond lift was about 10 feet vertical of lift. That created an additional 14.4 billion gallons. So that moved that 84.4 billion gallons to a 98.9 million gallons. So that's all at this point capable of carrying full storage. We do need to do a leak drawdown test at some point when we fill it up completely, just to fully certify the pond lift. For all intents and purposes, the north pond lift is completely live for storage opportunity. The other big part of this is the snowmaking. You guys are all intimately familiar with where this is, but I think last time I left off with you guys, we were still working toward an approval of the discharge permit. We have received the MPDS discharge permit to make snow, 25 million gallons per year from the DEQ. We also have our DNRC Title 85 water rights review approved, which is a big part of this. Anytime you reallocate wastewater from one usage to another, it needs to have an evaluation of whether there's a water right component that needs to be reviewed to it or not. The third part of this is the DEQ engineering design report that's still under finalizing review. We've gone back and forth on some comments. I think right now it's just a paperwork issue on their end, getting us the approvals. But that's in motion. We should hopefully have this here shortly. So on the snowmaking front, we are currently procuring materials. We're going to break ground in May. We're going to try to get it all done within one summer's effort, 37,000 linear feet of pipe. We'll see how this goes. But at this point, we're full tilt boogie to get this thing in the ground. And this time next year will be, hopefully this time next year we're done making snow. It's kind of a weather dependent deal. This year's been kind of hard with the temperatures, you know. But they'll give us, you know, that disposal opportunity, which I'll circle back on here after a little bit.
How deep's that pipeline?
Generally speaking, 6 to 7 feet.
So it is.
Yeah, and it's all ductile iron.
Yeah.
The whole way, high pressure, 1,000 PSI ductile iron pipe. Yeah, it's got to actually come from Europe, so it's quite the lead time. It's not like your U.S. driven. It's just because of the pressure. It's kind of
What is the material in the pipe?
It's
Not in the pipe, what is the piping material?
the piping material is ductile iron, so it's basically coated
Copper
concrete.
wire? That's the right choice.
Yeah,
Hey, Rich, is the new system dedicated to the Effluent snowmaking? Is that how that,
100% dedicated to it, correct, Peter?
and then is there intertie between the other aspects of the snowmaking system? Could you introduce Effluent to those others, or are you guys kind of trying to keep it separate? Because that's the permit area, correct?
Exactly. Pioneer operates separately from Eglise Mountain where this snowmaking application will take place. Eglise will be 100% dedicated to effluent. Pioneer is 100% dedicated to freshwater.
Okay.
Yeah. And at some point, maybe there's some opportunity to commingle, but I don't think we have treatment or technology opportunities at this time. So kind of taking some of that information, in looking at where we were back when that letter was created by Gal and the sewer district back in 2018, you know, we had, looking at this blue row here, a total constructed volume of storage across the Spanish Peaks and YC facilities of 111 million gallons. And some of you guys may recall, but there's a YC component attached to that as well. CYC needs to have enough storage capabilities to hit their full build out during non-irrigation seasons as well. So that's where that reserve of 17 million gallons is attached to. And we also have a minimum pond storage component on the YC pond of 3.2 million gallons. So that arose into that 111 to where in 2018, the district's usable volume was at 90.8. So that's exactly where Ray Armstrong's 39.2 number came into play. There's no quiz at the end of this, so I think we're good. But anyway, I want to go back to that 18, let you guys know where we were then. So taking that to where we are today. Oh, sorry, there we go. Touch your mouse. All right. If we look at that North Pond upgrade of 14.4 million gallons, and another component that I kind of skipped over back in 18, we didn't have qualified information at the time on the Spanish Peaks Old Hen Pond. We estimated somewhere between 13 and 14.5 million gallons, and since that time, we've been able to substantiate that total volume of 14 million gallons based on flow records. So that grew 1 million gallons along with that 14.4. That's bringing our total constructed volume from 111 to 126.5 million gallons. And that erosion of the YC storage brings us to 106.2 million gallons currently available today for the district storage. Okay, so at this point, I'll take a pause. Does the board have any, Ron, you guys have any questions of any of this?
What's your current storage use? Your 17 million full build out, where are you at right now?
I think we're just south of that, but the thing to remember is that that's more storage instead of a total annual, because we can do the in and out during the irrigation season. I believe we're sitting right about 16 per year that we're creating right now. So when we hit full build out, it might be slightly north of that 17, but we're going to be able to take advantage of that 4-month irrigation window to focus more on that 17 via storage instead of disposal. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Rich, this is Tom Reeves. My question is on the YC North Pond is the pictures you showed, when it is full, how close is it to the top?
Good question, Tom. The DEQ requires 3 feet of freeboard. So we're going to be sitting right around this edge here in that remaining. Can you see my cursor on this, Tom?
I can
Okay.
see it.
All right. So that upper 3 feet freeboard, and then the usable volume is below that, down to the 84.4 previous well point.
I think I asked you this before, Rich. So under the old pond, we had a pipe penetration that came out toward the top of that. And
Yes,
then
right.
that moved up with this new project, so that pipe penetration got pushed up.
Yep, that got lifted up.
Okay. And the reason that's important to us is if for some reason that pipeline fails open, the deeper that sits in the pond, the more water you got working against it
Mhm.
that can run back at you down to our pump station. So ideally, that's little or no water over the top of that thing.
Rich, Tom Reeves again. What is your anticipated snowmaking once you have the engineering approved by DEQ?
November 2022,
And what is a water volume?
25 million gallons
Thanks.
is what we're approved for, Tom. Yep. All right, so any other questions at this point? So when we entered into this agreement, the district was compelled to not do a direct pipe to the river. The available technology that we had was creating impoundments for irrigation purposes or direct discharge, again, which is what we're trying to avoid. We didn't have these other technologies in place, such as snowmaking, which we have today. The other component to it is we didn't quite understand the landscape within the greater Big Sky West Fork watershed as far as water availability and water disposal opportunities. You know, I think we've seen a lot of reports come out recently of water availability being the primary constriction point for Big Sky's growth, more so than treatment. And as we've all collectively grown into understanding the importance of recharging aquifers, maybe not so much being dependent on storing 8 months out of the year so we could irrigate 4 months out of the year, rather create opportunities that incentivize recharge instead of just irrigating to the agronomic uptake values of all the turf. We start to focus more on managing that water availability component within our watershed. And I think the snowmaking conversation is directly supporting that. I think your guys' plant upgrade is directly supporting that. And I think when we start looking more broadly, we're understanding the risk that these impoundments, these man-made features are creating for all of us, right? And it is somewhat of a, I don't know, old school is the right way, but you know, storing water 8 months out of the year, assuming those liabilities so we can just get rid of everything in those 4 months is, well, it's kind of like the 2001 era thought, you know? And what I want to talk to the board on here today is what really constitutes storage? You know, is it in fact us building more impoundments? And is it us taking on more of these impoundment liabilities so we can force irrigation through the systems? Or could we look at something such as snowmaking, taking a liquid form and transferring it into a solid ice form in the upper headwaters of the snowpack, also constituting storage? And if we did, what would this agreement then look like? To me, I think you can make the case that it's favorable for all parties. You know, what we're looking at doing is opening up that opportunity for disposal greater than that 4-month irrigation window each year, which is going back to 2018 when every single one of these ponds was right at the tipping point in April. I think all of us chewed our fingernails off that year. We would have given anything to have been able to turn a snow gun on just to create a pressure relief valve. And I think also by assuming snowmaking as being a storage component, similar to any other impoundment philosophy, it incentivizes the recycling component more so than just the older irrigation spray forest type methodology that we've kind of built this general agreement around. So if we were to look at the YC snowmaking project as being a storage element within this agreement, you can see where it clearly satisfies the district's usable volume storage. And if we start looking at future opportunities, whether it's when the plant comes up online, YC, we're going to try to make that 25 grow into 50. And Spanish Peaks is currently putting in the exact same infrastructure YC's projected to put in. So we can work through a permitting effort at Spanish Peaks similar to YC to also use snow for reclaimed efforts and disposal.
Hey, Rich, didn't I read in like a draft of that snowmaking on Spanish Peaks that it's another 26 million gallons?
Yeah, Mike, exactly. Hey, welcome. It's 26 million gallons on Spanish Peaks, and it's 25 additional potential on YC, which should give us an additional potential of 50 million gallons into the future. None of that's permitted, but that's something that our goals are moving forward toward. But even that aside, just focusing on the current landscape of what YC's wanting to put in the ground at the existing 25 that we're permitted for, you can see where we're already satisfying that storage requirement. So it's a question I have for the board. Is this methodology of taking liquid effluent and turning it into a solid and transporting it to the upper watershed for the benefit of the whole community constitutes storage?
And I'm going to advise the board not to respond because he's asking you to renegotiate the contract without the contract in front of you and to interpret it.
And we're not gonna get an answer today. But go ahead with your comment.
Well, I'd comment to Rich, it's an interesting proposal. And that's it.
Right, so in the old YC agreement, there's two big numbers, Rich pointed them out at the beginning. 160 million gallons total disposal. Back then, it was all contemplated to be irrigation, that's correct. And then there's 130 million gallons of total storage commitment. The board allowed the Spanish Peak storage to count towards that total, because in the agreement, it actually did say YC. Spanish Peaks is not YC. So that was one thing we did quite a few years ago to count that towards that 130 goal. At one time, YC had plans to build a second pond just south of their big one. It's never been built. Those plans are still in a file somewhere.
Their design, yeah.
Yeah. Whether it got DEQ approval, I don't know, but, and then, this latest work was actually lifting the perimeter of that pond up to gain more storage. So they keyed in their liner, lifted the whole thing up to gain what, another 14 million. So to change that number, and that was Susan's comment, that's in that contract. And
151.
the 130, right. So if that number comes down, does that contract then need to be amended to recognize that? Maybe it does, I don't know, but the concept's still the same.
I don't think he's asking to, I don't know, correct us if we're wrong, Rich. I don't think you're asking to modify the storage or the disposal. You're just asking for a methodology that works for both.
That's exactly right, Mike. I see it being more of how are we defining storage in today's landscape? I don't want to reopen the agreement. I guess that's a legal conversation beyond me, but I want to entertain with the board what that definition of storage ultimately is going to look like, what it could look like.
My advice remains the same.
Well, at some point in time, we have to talk about the deal. So yeah, I mean, I don't know when that happens, but maybe we put it on a separate agenda to talk about it as a board as we educate ourselves more on this. I'm more familiar with the agreement than probably anybody on this call, but and I do agree with Susan that there's a lot of words in that agreement. There's a lot of technicalities that need to be looked at to consider this, but there is a piece of it that the intent was for storage and disposal. Probably the primary thing with disposal. Yellowstone Club, Spanish Peaks is going to invest a lot of money into their snowmaking and trying to get snowmaking disposal and permit approvals and whatnot. And I think it's worthy of some district consideration towards those efforts.
Next November, just out of curiosity, next November, 25 million gallons minutes now.
Yes. Yeah, if we're able to get the whole system in, Mike, we will. It'll be a $10 million project.
So the top end of the snowmaking increases to 160, you think, for total disposal?
Potentially.
Potentially.
Yeah, potentially.
That's important to our side.
25 million gallons is twice the 26 million gallons of Spanish Peaks are in the process of permitting for. And then we don't know what Big Sky Resort would ultimately utilize as well down the road.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Additional than what we're currently permitted for. Yeah. So there's a lot of unknowns that have additional potential here.
And the Spanish Peaks snowmaking would be on ski terrain?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's southern number.
Yes.
Everything was
Right.
They've installed phase 1 this year, and we're working into feasibility studies for snowmaking as we this last summer and then this summer as well. There's a lot of water quality baseline stuff we need to capture. And I hear what Susan's saying completely. There's a lot of words and a lot of stuff to that agreement that needs to get explored. This is simply me making the first conversation with the board on ultimately what that storage definition could potentially look like. And in my opinion, what it should look like, because it is the same goal that we're all working toward, which is incentivizing recycling, incentivizing managing our water availability within this watershed.
Yeah. Spanish Peaks developing 9-hole course is twice the same or?
Not yet.
Not yet.
There's conversation, but it's certainly not where Spanish Peaks is. It's years and years out. Yeah.
Which is a 25 million gallon permitted number based on your infrastructure. Outtake of the area, is that a not to exceed number, or can that roll?
Currently, it's our currently, Jim, that's what's gonna model into our basal snowpack over 55 acres. And that 25 million gallons is the ceiling of what we're permitted for today. That permit is good for a 5-year cycle. I'm currently filing discharge monitoring reports on the permit now. When that cycle comes up, plants online, I look forward to expanding that permit to that 50.
Rich, what's the snowmaking window? There, obviously, whenever you can start October, let's say, do they permit you to go past January? Or is there some kind of cutoff early in the winter?
We stipulated the front end of the winter, late fall, early winter. We could extend that during the typical snowmaking window of the season here if we needed to. Yeah.
You want to point out where you're making snow?
Yeah, you bet. So we can, we're looking at pulling the water from our treated effluent pond here. Our main is going to run down the west side of our golf course under 30 Yellowstone via Bore and Jack, and then up into this ski terrain we see here. This is the main conduit. It'll terminate on the upper elevation right at 8,600 feet here. We have some other runs to the west down in this zone that'll pick up the remaining ski terrain. And then as we come down this run, there's a run that isn't shown in this aerial that deviates off of this main run here and is a little bit further to the west. We'll be making snow on that run as well. So that's the 55 acres footprint that I was referring to with Jim, where we modeled in an 18-inch snowpack, basal snowpack, and that will allow us to apply 25 million gallons.
And the drainage for that, Rich, is all into Muddy Creek?
There's 2 receiving waters on our permit, Dick. They both have potential, but they're through our water quality monitoring the previous 2 years, we didn't see a direct connection from the snow melt on the ski run to the surface waters. A lot of that has to do with, as you recall, when you look at a ski run in May, you usually see the compacted surface snow present, but you see a lot of the surrounding vegetation greened up and capable of absorbing and using those natural filtration processes a little bit more actively. And that's a good way to put why we probably haven't seen a direct connection. We've also used a vegetative buffer off of our ski runs, Dick, of on average about 1,000 linear feet. Some areas as we get down lower are a little bit closer, but further up on a glacier, we're, in areas of almost 1,500 linear feet between where we're going to be making snow and the surface waters.
Okay. I have another question on Spanish Peak snowmaking. What would be feasible to run pipe up to run the effluent up? How far into Spanish Peaks is it feasible?
Rich, I can take that one if you want.
Yeah, thanks, John. Go for it.
Yes, so Dick, right now we've got our existing snowmaking system that runs snow up to the top of the Lewis and Clark lift. And our phase 1 system is basically providing snowmaking for just the Spanish Peaks terrain. We have a phase 2 system that we haven't designed yet that we will be working on in the future that could take snowmaking to potentially to the top of andesite and hit 3 of the Southern Comfort ski runs as well.
And it's feasible to pump water effluent up from the force main all the way up there?
Yes, it is.
Oh, good. Okay. So you'd cover that whole area from the bottom of Southern Comfort over to the Montage now?
Yeah, that is correct. Actually, our phase 1 system is going to, we didn't get it, all the infrastructure installed this summer, but our phase 1 system, which we will complete next spring, will provide snowmaking also from, where the bridge that crosses from deep south over into the Spanish Peaks terrain. It'll provide snow from there all the way down to the base of Southern Comfort. And then the phase 2 would take it from that location up. But yeah, the hydraulics in our existing pump station would allow us to pump water up. Now we would probably have to put a second pond in and maybe even a second pump station, but it's all part of our phase 2 system that we would have to design. But those are the areas that when we did our last water right application that we included for snowmaking from Spanish Peaks.
How big would that set be, John?
Again, Mike, we'll have to take a look at that and see. We had some preliminary designs on it, but I don't know exactly how large that pond would be right now.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Rich.
So question for Ron, maybe the 130 million gallons of disposal, 160 of storage. How were those numbers arrived at? Or
130 storage, sorry.
Okay, yep. How were those arrived at? They kind of just arbitrarily selected, or is there some kind of water?
No, the genesis of the numbers had to do with their original development plans. So in the agreement for those disposal storage amounts, they're the commitments for capacity of the treatment plant. So you had Spanish Peaks at 41 million gallons and Lone Moose Meadows at 38.5, I believe. And so it was looking at their projected needs, and this was really early on in all of the development. So that was basically where it came from.
Gotcha. Thanks.
So if we were going to take a gallon into the plant, we wanted more going out the backside.
Right.
So there was a bit of a ratio on that.
Well, Tom, I'll certainly defer to you if you want to table this, if it's something that you feel the board wants to bring up again. I think that it's the right thing to do for our watershed, and it incentivizes recycling, and it also works to create opportunity for disposal much greater than that 4-month window that we're currently seem to be on board with or not on board with.
Well, thank you, Rich. And I think there's some interesting ideas there. I don't think we're ready at this point in time to undertake it unless somebody else thinks that they want to dive into this and come back to the board with some recommendations.
Is there any urgency related to short-term decisions, or is this something that can play out for a little while?
Well,
How are your negotiations with the URC, with the company?
With the DNRC, fluid.
Louis. Good answer.
They're great to work with. Yeah, I think the biggest take home on that reallocation of water bill is because it's been used for irrigation and it's essentially an effective agreement for the purpose of irrigation, i.e. 100% agronomic uptake utilization, that anything less than 100% agronomic uptake is a benefit to the DNRC and the downstream water right users. If that conversation was reversed, I think that Title 85 DNRC review would be different.
Okay, thank you.
I agree.
So I guess there is a little bit of sensitivity on this, Tom, and the fact that the district issued a letter to the developers in the agreement to satisfy phase 3 of the storage. So if you remember right, it took forever to get DEQ approval on phase 3 of the storage. A part of the in-between to that was this expansion of the pond. The DEQ issued a permit on the expansion of the pond quicker than the next pond in line. And so, yeah, did you receive DEQ approval, Rich, for that next pond?
No, not yet, Mike. We're still navigating design.
Yeah, so that's still a battle. So that's getting the DEQ approval. So there was a window of performing to the storage once we got the district's letter, but frankly, we performed with hiring engineers at the right time, but the DEQ hasn't been responsive to creating another pond. So there's a little bit of impetus to this as it relates to the district's request for satisfying the storage in the agreement and maybe a consideration or analysis of the stuff that Rich is producing in lieu of that.
Well, I think there's also, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that there's going to be some legal stuff that goes on with this too. And I kind of would like to see that play out before we get too far down the path on changing anything.
Yeah, certainly closing out a lawsuit against the DEQ on a snowmaking permit and yeah, discharge on golf course. The district's in the same boat with their ponds. Yeah, there's a lot of dust that needs to be settled from some of our friends out there that would help this discussion along if we knew the finality to all that. So I don't disagree with that.
Wouldn't we want to know the number, how big that pond is, Spanish Peaks too, the second phase pond? Would that technically play into storage as well?
It would be above and beyond what we're discussing here. And I don't know if our engineering design is far enough ahead for that yet. But to that point, there is more storage that we're migrating into. You know, whether it be additional storage, additional snowmaking at Spanish Peaks, additional snowmaking at YC beyond what we're currently permitted for, and potential, impoundments over at Spanish Peaks in the future. Those are all, beyond this talk.
Yeah. To
the benefit of storage.
Does anybody know where the litigation stands on the suit against the DEQ on snowmaking?
I can take a rudimentary stab at that, Tom. The judge has issued a schedule that appears to have some finalization to it at some point in May 2022, if it holds its schedule true.
This is district court.
This is district court. Correct.
So could this also be expanded to federal court?
I don't think it's probably productive to guess at where any of this can go without, some serious analysis. right? You know, my philosophy, anybody can sue you anytime, anywhere for anything. It's how well you can defend yourself.
All right, well, it sounds to me like we're kind of tabling this at least until some things solved in the district court and you get your engineering approval for snowmaking.
Certainly, Tom, and we gotta put the system in the ground, right? You know, we have a whole schedule ahead of us this upcoming summer. It's gonna be quite busy.
Well, exactly, and but I do appreciate you coming to us now and having us giving us some food for thought on this.
Well, I appreciate you guys giving me the time. Thank you.
Take some food.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Take some food, guys.
Seriously.
I think our next item is the fiscal year 2021 financial review report approval.
Yeah, so board packet, there's copies of the financial reports from the auditor. I'll let Terry take it from here.
This is the report that's going to go to the Department of Administration to fulfill the requirements of the statutes for special districts. The audit report itself we'll have for the board at the January meeting if all goes well. I'm working with the auditor now to get that finished up. But this report that you're seeing is our auditor's review of our financials to be submitted to the Department of Administration. And you just have to accept it to be submitted.
Any comments or questions on this?
What's the filing fee? $1,700.
There's no comments or questions. I would entertain a motion.
This is Dick. I'll make a motion to accept the report. Is that correct?
Yes.
We have a motion by Dick. Do we have a second?
Second, Mike.
Second by Mike Wilcynski. Is there any further comment from the board? I would also take any public comment at this point in time, and I'll wait 30 seconds for people to react to that. Hearing no public comment, I will call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. With that, we're on to Scott Bucher and the WWTP upgrade.
Thanks. The first section of my letter always touches on construction and how it's going. Got really good news just today. They got the bypass operating with the siphon, which was always going to be one of the toughest parts of the job. So right now, wastewater is flowing around the bulk of the construction site, and they can go at the bulk of the job, not have to worry about raw wastewater making those existing networks. So it was a big milestone, and their overall schedule, they tell us that they're still on for the 90-day extension, which you all gave them 3 months ago. It's slow going and stuff, but they're going to begin erecting the tent out there that they want to do winter concrete, and they continue to assure us that they'll make it. I can scroll down. the second round of ARPA, so under financial, we're working towards an application for the Mountain Village water system improvements that Kelsey's going to present on here in a little bit. I've got a summary of all of our budgets for the work we are doing for you right now. Everything is in fine shape given where we are, other than potentially district engineering, because it's been hit pretty hard just for as needed work related to the pump stations, the cleaning out of potential cleaning out next year of aeration pond, and the case with cotton. Mountain Village water system improvements, I won't get into this too much other than to preview what Kelsey's going to present. She's looked at all the wells up in the village and the Cascade system and splitting that system, which has been on Jim's wish list for many, many years. It's just a smart move. That's kind of the base project. Beyond that would be how much treatment to put in to enable use of water sources that are, some are just not quite servable to the public yet, but could easily be. Some of those wells are fine as they are. There's a mixed bag, and we'll go through that. And today we'd like to get just the blessing from the board on what to move forward with for that PDR that will be submitted in January for ARPA funding. The idea that we get the $2 million that ARPA, Montana ARPA has generally been awarding folks no matter what their project is, whether it's a $42 million wastewater treatment plant or $5 million water system upgrade. Continuing to work on the wastewater collection system model, we need TBH to go out and grab about 3 or 4% more of the manholes in the collection system, but Donovan's working on that. And then district engineering services just continuing to support the analyses for the cottonwood suit. Helping with succession planning, we have a couple of different board charts for the subcommittee to look at. We're looking at, still looking at reuse booster pump replacements for YC pump station 1 and 2. We did go up and look at Boyne's snowmaking pumps. Those are vertical turbines, and I don't think we want to go that route just because it would be very expensive and require full replumbing of the YC 1 and 2. So it'd be expensive. We want to keep looking at the existing multi-stage centrifugals that are in there. Under future work, the only there's 3 listed there. One is just finishing your water master plan eventually. The second bullet there is keeping you all aware of the need to clean out aeration pond this summer, and working with RSCI on whether or not they would take that and do it, self-perform it, or if we're going to help them find a contractor to clean that out. It's a lot of volume. We would need a contractor, whoever it is, to set up dewatering on the berm there in order to haul dewatered sludge down to the Gallup Valley for disposal. So that's a significant project.
Scott's talking about this one. So this is our initial pond that comes back from the SDR sleep pump after it's processed here into here. This water goes to this pump station, which goes to the filter building. Post filtration goes to this pond and this pond. So Grant did a sludge judge, which is a measure of how many solids are in there. Grant, are you on this meeting?
Yes, he is. Ask him down here.
Yep, I'm here.
You wanna just explain real quick what you found when you sludge judged that pond?
Yeah, Peter and I went out there on the Good Ship Lollipop, and we took 6 measurements from the aeration pond, and I think 6 from the pond 1 and 6 from pond 3. The aeration pond, yeah, there's quite a bit of sludge in that, and I sent the percent solids on to Scott, so that'll give the contractor something to work with.
So what we've seen over time is that these ponds kind of have their own biology going, because what we're producing at the plant doesn't always end up in the ponds with the same TN numbers. So we think the sludge is adding to the higher nitrogen numbers that we see in these storage ponds. So to correct that, the plan is to clean that out.
Part of the WRF project was to be able to pump, reuse effluent fresh, and use it right away. So we could take ponds offline. The issue is right now that the nitrogen that's being picked up in that aeration pond would potentially prohibit someone from making snow in fall of 2022. So we need to start clean out and start fresh eventually, regardless. But the timeline's being moved up. Desire to use the water for snow making next year. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
There's a look ahead. Nice thing for the district would be to look down there and see some walls. Not too far in the distant future, they got the form work up for the perimeter walls.
I took these pictures today, trying to see what's going up the site there. These are some form walls going up here. Big excavation happening here, and the winter tenting structures are going together here pretty soon, I think.
That excavator in the foreground is the tap into that site line.
Right here. Yeah. So this is the line that comes from the ponds across underneath the middle port, and they're intersecting that line, and that was worked on the last 2 days.
Yeah, 3 pipes, raw wastewater, very tough part of the project. RCI finished today successfully, no spills.
There's the batch plant. I think they're good to go for the winter. They've got their canopy up.
Yep, and concrete looks good so far. Just need 20 more guys. Or 40. 60.
You mentioned they're on schedule, but what's your view? You think they're on schedule?
I think it's a healthy worry is good, but all we can do is keep asking them. They should give us their full week. They're going to deliver us a complete look ahead after the year. But Trent, their project manager, said, okay. We meet every Wednesday. 10 a.m. You are welcome to jump on.
So this is the agenda, and then the minutes get added into the agenda. And these have been great with all the Zooming and Teams we do these days, building these projects and doing these weekly meetings is it's easy to do, and everybody kind of knows what's currently being worked on and schedules. And that's very, very helpful. I think it's the new way to do it.
So remember to hit record.
Yep.
All right, make it back.
Any other questions for Scott?
Oh, that last future work is just keep on your plate that at some point you should make a decision about that phase 2 concrete.
July was the time I don't know.
Yeah, and that was kind of a gentleman's agreement for the price, but you could do it. And I think they would want to revise the price potentially for it. And they also, they know that they're going to have a challenge in getting everything that's a contract milestone done by 2023. So they're just asking that not be any part of any of that schedule. To do it last, essentially. Okay.
When was the drop dead date for that concrete price? So Scott, you're telling us that optionality on the concrete pricing is still available, but we're going to impact our own schedule of the project if we say yes?
No, they're just saying we still would theoretically hold that price for you until June of 2022, but we don't want it to, don't expect us to be doing it while we're working on milestone 1 or 2.
How are our economics working to actually approve that? Are we even in a place that even with the ARPA money and everything that came down the line, are we at a place where we could approve that? Or is the escalation of the base project causing problems for us?
They haven't asked for any escalation of the base project, and they're not really allowed to by the contract. Contractors are doing some of that, but it's very case by case. So you're okay to negotiate that now if you'd like. The ARPA, Terry, the ARPA money is being put towards engineering, right?
Correct.
So that doesn't affect it. Mike, I think wouldn't hurt to go ahead and sit down.
Well, that affects it in that we're gonna recover $2 million we've already spent. So that 2 million could be earmarked for this. That gets us a little less than halfway there. We should try to commit to do this by the end of the first quarter of 2022. And if we slide a month, so be it. But,
yeah, can we put that on the agenda for, I don't know, February's meeting or something like that with a full breakdown on cost and revenue, like just a balance sheet of our cost and revenue, so we can make a good fiscal decision on that?
Yeah, sure.
And Terry, could we use PIC funds on this? Do we have those available?
Well, it depends on how much comes in next year. The revenue on the PIC funds is looking pretty good this year. We've got about 2.5 million left right now, and we've got I plan on spending about another 750,000 towards the project that we're doing now. So I expect that we should have another roughly 2 million available for that. And then there's also the asset replacement funds on the sewer side where we have about 7 million there that the board could allocate towards that as well. So I think you're sitting in a good position financially if the costs on that don't go too high. So.
Well, I think we've all collectively said that this is a good project to do now, and the savings are pretty important. So can we get it on the agenda for February with the map that I was talking about?
Yep.
Yeah, I'd just like Terry to give us proposals on how to finance it. Sounds like we're recovering $2 million of engineering costs with the ARPA funds, and then we have ample asset replacement and PIC funds as well. So.
Correct.
Yeah, we're on the same page, Tom. I want to see the money side.
Okay.
All right, moving on.
But Mike, the part of that equation should be an estimate for the desludging and cleaning out of the irrigation pump.
Ballpark on that? Do you have any numbers?
No, we gotta find some place to take it
Okay.
first, where I would feel good about that.
Is that a professional problem with the new plant, the new treatment levels? This is like maybe a one and done project to get that cleaned out, so we should have that issue with the board.
No. No, you've got a little bit of sludge in irrigation ponds 1 and 2, but nothing near to that extent because it's post filtration. We might want to clean those out someday, but we can plan to be able to take those offline and still make irrigation water. So you could. And the MBR is going to have 1% of that solids that's historically hit this pond. So shape for a long time to come.
How much space are we going to need to look for the water? This coming in that.
In terms of equipment,
As far as the disposal of the sludge or the sludge in water, do you have an idea of how much land we're going to need for these items? I'm assuming we're going to need biomass to be water.
Not necessarily, but that's one option.
there are outfits that do this for a living, show up and clean out a pond with a belt press, or swing press, or some mechanical piece of equipment. That's what we're planning on. So I got your questions about the footprint now, which is significant, to take up all of that berm. And I think we used to talk about using your phone yard down here. Water.
So we did this before.
Staging is kind of staging area for the contractor, but it's significant. As far as getting rid of the sludge, it would be hauling it down to Galvin Valley, putting it on land or Logan landfill, or Scenic City, maybe taking it. You're not finding anything right now that's a free one.
Few water yards, 10,000, 20,000.
And we did this before. We had a trailer mounted filter belt press and polymer. We had 4 feet of sludge in the parking lot of our shop years ago. So it was a big project. So we have done. This one would be easier than that one.
What did cost last time?
I don't.
These are the original ones.
No, this is, yeah, they incorporated some of the sludge into the embankments. Yeah. It's so long ago, I don't think the cost really.
Let's say they're like $300. That's something along those lines.
Right. That's right. That's right.
I think good, very good soil amendment. It's just.
Well, Wheeler was able to stack a bunch of dirt over here. We should be able to put a bunch of sludge there.
He needs a new soccer field.
Just for the record, that didn't end well. That did not end.
I was waiting for you to bang in on that.
Hey, I wish I had that dirt right now.
Right? Anything else?
Not on the run of the mill business.
Okay.
That flat iron.
Yeah, so under developments and subdivisions, county planning and zoning had a meeting December 10th. They approved the Gallatin County side of the PUD. I put copies of some articles about the meeting in the board packet. And then Madison County has a meeting, I believe it's January 31st for their side of the development plan. And I guess they have an interim planning director that's a consultant. I haven't talked to him yet, but their planner left and they've got somebody filling in for them.
Well, they have an interim planner, then they're interviewing in-house now. And then I think they're consulting with another county on some one-off subdivisions, but they are interviewing someone right now for that permanent role.
Okay.
I just, I received a call on a pre-construction safety review. Came up as West Yellowstone, twice, and I'm just wondering if they're getting some support from West. But yeah, I think they're farming some of this out.
Just, real quickly. So, I mean, the Gallatin side is relatively easy because it incorporates the area that's part of the capacity obligation in the Yellowstone Club agreement. So all of this area is covered by that. So there was really no contest there. The big issues of water we had Mark Canadian look at the wells up there. We don't think there've been any water rights filed for these well points over here, which I think is correct. And then, so the Madison piece, none of this is in the district. This is out, this is out. There's a little piece up in here that's in the district boundaries. So this gets a little trickier for Madison County.
Well, I listened to the whole meeting and it sounds like the PUD is just the start, that there's a number of hurdles in terms of traffic studies, sewer capacity, slope assessment that needs to go through. And so it's going to be a long process for them.
Yeah, I talked to Michael Schreiner a couple days ago, and I think he mentioned there were like 65 conditions attached to that approval. So there's a long list of things for sure.
What cost them, didn't they turn it down early on?
The advisory committee in Big Sky voted unanimously against it, is my recollection. But they're advisory, they have no say in it.
I think the vote was based on, for a zoning meeting, that there was no, with all the conditions, 61 conditions or whatever it was, that there was really no reason they couldn't approve this, but that there were a lot of issues still that needed to be fleshed out and voted on by the planning and zoning.
Right. And then the other one I had was Powder Light Lot 4. It was pretty remarkable watching the vertical go up on that thing. And then they did a kind of an open house tour. I think Vince went to that back on December 3rd. I mean, as you drove back and forth, they were literally stacking new floors within it here too. And these things are basically fully furnished, which is kind of a new concept. But, so that's cranking along. Powder Light Lot 3, I mentioned in my manager's report, we'll take that up after the first of the year. And there's a reference made to that in the article Bella wrote, but we'll revisit that after the new year. Any questions on any of the development stuff?
I think we're on to ARPA funding and Kelsey Wagner.
Yes. Vince, we're gonna make her the host. I'm gonna get you set up here, Kelsey, and we'll flip this.
Okay, great, thanks.
She got it? Not yet. Not seeing she's a hostess yet.
I don't know if I can share my screen in this meeting, but
Trying to make it happen.
it's not really necessary if you don't mind driving.
You should be good now.
All right, so you've got,
She's co-host.
yeah,
All right, now, Kelsey.
there we go.
Well, I've got a new option to do stop participant sharing, but I don't see where I can share my screen in the view options.
I have to stop sharing mine for you to share yours. Yeah, I can just run them if you want to tell me when you change them.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody for being here for today's presentation. This is on the Mountain Village potable water system improvements, specifically the preliminary engineering report and alternatives. So you can go to the next slide, please, Ron. This is the agenda. Just wanted to go through a quick background overview, talk about the project drivers, give a project status update, focus on the alternatives analysis, and then take some time to discuss any decisions and next steps. Next slide, please. So this is the water and wastewater district service boundaries. And this project focuses on the Big Sky Mountain Village, which is in the upper left-hand boundary of the figure shown. So you can go to the next slide, Ron. So this is a close-up of the existing Mountain Village system infrastructure. The way the system operates now is that Mountain Well number 1, Mountain Well number 2, Mountain Well number 4, and Mountain Well number 7 all feed the Hill Booster Station wet well that pumps water to the Cascade Booster Station wet well that then feeds water to the Cascade tank that distributes water to the whole Mountain Village system, and then also Aspen Groves and a few others, and is connected to the Meadow Village by an 8-inch line. So you can go to, and then, sorry, okay. So one of the main goals of the project is to re-split Mountain Village into 2 systems. And the 2 systems are tentatively defined as the Cascade system and the Core Mountain system. And if the systems are divided, there will need to be source water for the Cascade area that will feed the Cascade wet well directly. And then Hill Booster Station will will feed the Mountain Village tank instead of the Cascade Booster Station wet well. And there's the district provided the number of SFEs on the Cascade service area. So thanks, Vince and Jim, for that information. This is meter data. And it includes the Cascade Subdivision, Montana Club, Beaverhead Subdivision, and Powder Ridge. And there are So we took those demand numbers and we applied a non-revenue factor. The non-irrigation average day demand revenue or factor was 2.07. The average day demand factor was 1.76, and the max day demand factor was 1.4, and that was just to get at the actual production needed to serve the Cascade area demand. We also looked at the Yellowstone Club usage for those same time periods, which are in the second column. And this third column shows the actual Yellowstone Club usage plus the existing usage in the first number on the left side, and the right-hand side shows the Cascade area plus the Yellowstone Club commitment of 150 gallons per minute. And then
Might just have a timeout to explain the Yellowstone Club is the connection at the mountain village that's crosses the mountain, crosses the site, right? Correct. So they're feeding a Yellowstone Club commitment off the mountain village system, and that's why she has a column to account for that demand.
so yeah, like Scott said, there's the option to serve Yellowstone Club either from the Cascade or from the core mountain village once the systems are divided. And then the build out projections from the 2016 5-year capital improvements plan by WGM and Woodard and Curran predicted a Cascade build out demand of 360 gallons per minute. And then that number was used to back calculate the number of SFEs. And according to the 2015 Western Groundwater Source Capacity Update, it's about 400 gallons per day per SFE. So that SFE works out to be about 1,300 SFEs. And then the non-irrigation average day demand and average day demand were then extrapolated from the current usage per SFE to give you that 60 gallons per minute demand for non-irrigation ADD and the 190 gallons per minute for the average day demand. Those numbers aren't very significant for design because DEQ cares about max day demand. So really the 360 gallons per minute is the number that we're working off of. And actually that number is maybe conservative compared to the 2019 Western Groundwater Tech Memo that shows predicts a build out of about 1,200 SFEs and a max day demand of 330 gallons per minute. So feeling pretty good about that number for design purposes anyway. And then the final column is the build out plus Yellowstone Club. And that just assumes the 150 gallons per minute plus the Cascade service area demand. And so that's where you could arrive at up to 510 gallons per minute if you chose to serve Yellowstone Club from the Cascade booster station. Are there any questions on this slide? That's a lot of information to digest.
So the 150 gallon per minute demand from Yellowstone Club is a contractual obligation. And it just says up to 150 gallons per minute.
Yeah, and it goes back to the sewer agreement that we referred to previously in 2001. It's a commitment, 150 gallons a minute max. So unlike guessing how many SFPs we're going to grow to, we know that's a commitment we have. So it's actually pretty simple, and that agreement was made long So we can serve that agreement, we can serve that obligation either through the cascade system or the pump system. That's 150 gallons. A minute commitment that we need to have available to them. They don't use it all the time, they're 150 gallons a minute, but we have to reserve that capacity for that, to fulfill that obligation.
And moving it to Cascade, with splitting the system is just balancing out the demand.
As an operational point of view, that makes it much easier, much better for us in an operation. Regardless, we have to be able to send them 150.
Okay. You want the next slide?
Yes, please. So these are just the notes that I sort of covered in the last slide of how those numbers were reached and the basis for those calculations. Were there any questions on that or, okay. So this is the underutilized and potential source well characteristics that we're looking at using to supply the source for the Cascade system. I think everybody's familiar with Cascade well number 5, Cascade well number 6, that have hydrogen sulfide issues and some arsenic in Cascade well number 6. The district has been doing extensive efforts in investigating new source wells. Of the 9 test wells drilled since 2019, 7 and 8 were the most promising, but 7 and 8 are considered redundant of each other, so it's sort of one or the other. And test well number 8 has great water quality. It's unfortunately within the 100-foot setback from a sewer line, so there would have to be a deviation requested from DEQ, and it's anticipated that that deviation will require disinfection. And then mountain well number 3 could serve to supply the Cascade system. And there's some conversation about redrilling that well or rehabilitating that well, but it would be the largest producing well in that system. Are there, and so various combinations of these wells will entail varying amounts of treatment. And those treatment alternatives compose the alternative analysis that we'll discuss later in this presentation. Are there any questions on this slide? Okay, next slide, please, Ron. So the project drivers are to address system inefficiencies by splitting the Mountain Village system into 2 pressure zones, the Cascade and Core Mountain pressure zones. I should clarify per Jim's comment earlier today that there's really multiple pressure zones. And so we're actually resplitting the system as originally intended to enable the systems to work simultaneously and cooperatively. This will achieve pressure management and restore the system pumping rate capabilities to fully match the source capacity. It will result in significant pumping energy savings, where the 2016 CIP report estimated over $50,000 in reduced pumping costs alone in terms of energy savings. This will also reduce single points of failure and increase redundancy and resiliency in the systems. It will also serve to address source capacity deficit that was covered extensively during the last board meeting. And the 2015 source capacity update predicted that the district will be approaching a supply deficit around now. So that's kind of that's a major aspect of the project as well. Next slide, please. So to give you a project status update, we've been developing the preliminary engineering report. It's under internal QA/QC review, and it's in a good position. We're in a good position to submit it before the ARPA application deadline of January 14th, 2022, and it will add points to our application. So that's kind of the major driver to getting the PER completed as soon as possible. A major part of a complete PER, according to the Infrastructure Advisory Committee on ARPA, is public involvement in the alternatives analysis. So this meeting is serving as a public meeting to discuss the alternatives analysis for the completion of the PER. And wetland delineation was performed on November 1st by WGM. Other 30% design deliverables are the site survey and geotechnical report that will be provided by others. Completing the SRF funding uniform application that will also help our ARPA application. Providing upfront documentations of the specifications and providing general sheets, including site layout, major pipeline routing, PNIDs, and control narratives. And then we'll conduct a design workshop and presentation. Next slide, please. So now we'll jump into the alternatives analysis. And feel free to interrupt if you have any questions. Expect a lot of discussion over the next couple slides. So the alternatives that we looked at are alternative 1. It's no action. It's not evaluated further as it negates the use of any mentioned source wells and the ability to split the pressure zones. Alternative 2 is chemical addition without filtration. Consists of sodium hypochlorite storage and feed for oxidation and disinfection. It permits the use of cascade well number 5, test well number 8, potentially cascade well number 6, and potentially mountain well number 3, depending on blended water characteristics. Alternative 3 is chemical addition with filtration. In Scott Bucher's words, this is the sledgehammer approach that treats the most diverse range of water contaminants and allows you to maximize use of existing water resources by permitting the use of all the wells in the previous table. But it is extensive treatment consisting of oxidation, coagulation, filtration, and disinfection. We looked at 3 filtration alternatives, including dual media, sand and anthracite, vertical pressure filters, which is more conventional filtration recommended by West Tech when they learned about the project. There's also specialized media, specifically manganese dioxide, vertical pressure filters that eliminate the need for ferrochemical addition, but treats limited contaminants recommended by Adage. And then ultrafiltration membranes that treat the most diverse range of water contaminants are actually in between the other 2 filtration technologies cost-wise, but definitely a more complex treatment system. Next slide, please.
Chelsea, before you go on that slide, can I make an attempt to open out a little bit with layman terms of what we're looking at here? This is a lot here. Scott referred to it as the sledgehammer. And you got option 1, 2, and 3 there. He referred to it as the sledgehammer approach. We made a joke about it yesterday. I would refer to it as the get her done approach. The list of wells that you saw on the previous slide have 2 things in common. They all have some water potential. We did 2 years of drilling looking for new source water. Haven't found a lot. What we came up with is test well 7 and 8. We have Cascade 5 and 6 on the shelf with the H2S. We have original Mountain 3. They all have water in them. They also are all problem childs in their own way for treatment reasons. So what Kelsey is presenting in 2 and 3 is that we set this system up to handle some of the problems in some of the wells, or do we do the whole kahuna so we can use all those wells? That's what you're looking at right there. All these different options. Option 3 would allow to be able to, as soon as we get it done, we'd be able to use all that water and solve all the problems we have it. Option 2 is solving some of the problems and phasing in these improvements over time. I'm not recommending either one of them at this time, but just so you understand what it is she's putting in front of you.
Well, just to look around the corner, we're gonna land on this one, because of this right here. We need to run them, and see what this looks like. Until you get them all running, blended together, because they're gonna be combined sources, you don't necessarily have to jump into filtration yet, depending on what this looks like. But you need to be prepared to go there.
Yeah, it's kind of analogous to the potable reuse evaluation for this building right here. To make the potable water with the effluent from the plant, at least you have a number. Or the sledgehammer approach, you put filters in and use all those wells. If you don't do that, Kelsey's eventually going to show you, you got to drill more wells and hopefully they're good quality.
So yeah, this is a summary of the trade-offs between the alternatives that we kind of just covered. So thanks, Jim and Scott, and Ron for further clarification on that. Just to reiterate, alternative 2 limits the source wells that you can use, but there's no treatment building, and there's a much smaller treatment system consisting of only sodium hypochlorite feed and storage. Alternative 3 permits full utilization of existing resources, provides a rated capacity of 315 gallons per minute with the largest well, Mountain Well number 3 offline. But it does include the treatment building, and it includes a more involved treatment system consisting of sodium hypochlorite feed and storage for oxidation and disinfection, ferrochemical feed and storage for coagulation and filtration.
And that treatment building would be up on the Cascade booster station parcel.
Correct. Yep. So I think that's shown in one of the following slides, maybe the next slide actually. So great segue. Oh, no, it's not. I don't know if you need to see it yet. Do you want to see the footprint for the treatment building? It's a few slides away, or we can come back to it.
I can wait.
Okay. So just to reiterate, the production numbers that you saw in that table were used to give you an idea of when you might reach build out given a 5% and an 8% growth rate. So the y-axis is flow in gallons per minute and the x-axis is year. And that lowest dotted blue line is the 5% growth for Cascade demand only. That's Cascade, Montana Club, and Powder Ridge and Beaverhead subdivisions. The next dotted line then is the 8.8% growth for Cascade demand only. And then the two solid lines above that are the Cascade demand plus the 150 gallons per minute for Yellowstone Club for 5% growth and 8.8% growth.
Yeah, so the 150 is fixed, so it's not a growth factor on top of the YC. That's governed by our agreement with the club. So there's a cap on that, which doesn't grow over time. But the growth is for the rest of the system today.
Okay, can you go to the next slide, Ron?
So which curve on that are we supposed to be paying attention to if the curve involves growth with YC?
So the yellow curves represent basically the solid curves represent demand with Yellowstone Club.
Wait, I'm reading this wrong. I'm sorry. Scratch that question. You're flatlining the 150 no matter what in every scenario. The growth curves are just the cascade growth.
Yeah, so the lower, sorry, go ahead.
But Kelsey, you might explain how you picked 5 and 8.8, just to give them the background of where those numbers came from.
So yeah, the 5% is based on consensus data, and the 8.8% is based on the 5% is based on 10-year consensus published data, and the 8.8% is based on annual consensus data. And that's also supported in the Big Sky Wharf PER. So that kind of gives you a range of the growth rates you are predicted to see. And so that kind of gives you a range and timeline for better or worse that you might need those. The next slide actually shows dates. So again, yeah, the lower dotted curves represent potential cascade demand only, and then the upper curves represent cascade demand and Yellowstone Club. And so that cascade build out of 360 gallons per minute is anticipated between years 2038 and 2053. And the cascade build out plus the Yellowstone Club of 150 gallons per minute is 510 gallons per minute. And that's obviously anticipated between the same time frame of 2038 to 2053.
And that 510, that's a peak value?
That's max day demand, yep. Plus the white Yellowstone Club cap.
Which is the summertime.
Yeah, so yep, those are based on July and August demands.
I think one piece that we might be overlooking is that all of the real estate available right now is in the Cascade side of things. Everything in the foreground has mostly been exhausted. So all of our future growth might be in the Cascade.
So they knock them down and build bigger. Right.
So basically alternative 2 can provide cascade demand but not Yellowstone Club, with only Cascade well number 5 and test well number 8, which are the highest water quality wells. I think if you click again, there might be some text boxes that pop up, Ron. Okay, thanks. So alternative 2 can provide the cascade demand now for the existing infrastructure at firm capacity, which is how DEQ rates your source capacity. But it can also provide cascade demand until 2033 to 2041 at full capacity with storage to supplement source capacity, which you have ample storage with Cascade Tank.
Kelsey, I would add, alternate 2 also solves many of the operational problems of the high pressures and the things that we are fighting also. So option 2 covers a lot of things. I like Ron feel that's probably the option you should look at. Go ahead.
Just gotta keep YC on.
The YC thing is, would be nice to switch them over to balance it, but it's not critical at all. The pressures we're dealing with on a daily basis, the damage we're suffering on the distribution side because of it needs to go away. All that gets taken care of with option 2. And Ron brings up a good point. We have capability with well 3 and a few other options of blending. So how much treatment, how much filtration we need is yet to be determined. So.
Correct. Thanks, Jim. So alternative 3 can provide cascade demand at firm capacity until 2037 to 2050, and can provide cascade demand until build out at full capacity with storage to supplement source capacity. And then can you go to the next slide, Ron? And alternative 3 can also supplement Yellowstone Club on top of cascade demand. Where at firm capacity, it can provide source capacity until year 2030 to 2037, and then furnish demand until years 2037 to 2050 at full capacity, which is 460 gallons per minute. But booster pumps will need to be upsized from the current units that can produce 450 gallons per minute. And then, can you click again, Ron? There might be one more on this. But essentially, more source capacity is needed to provide both Cascade and Yellowstone Club demand at build out at that 510 gallons per minute, beyond the existing potential water sources.
Unless you could drop summertime irrigation demand a bit over time.
So, sorry, Ron, if you just keep clicking, this is the summary slide and it's going to be annoying. It's just going to have all those boxes. Oops. But I don't know if you wanted to go back and just kind of, if anybody had any discussion, this is kind of all that information on one slide.
Part of this motivation was to say, if you only have the water you have today with its minor issues, where does it get you if you put filters on? Get you to EBO, or would you still be short?
If you know, I find this to be extremely interesting. I think it's well that you're looking that far ahead. But what I'm curious as to be, what would be the population of this watershed if we get to this? That slide right there.
Great question. So, Kelsey, go back to your table with the SFPs that you back out of.
Yeah, so the current SFPs for Cascade area are about 290 units, and the build out is approximately 1,200 to 1,400 SFPs based on your range in estimate of gallons per day per SFE at max day demand.
1,300 SFEs that build out, but how many people per SFE has always been a question.
Yeah, right? Sure.
How many of those are
you know, sooner or later, there's limitations that are going to come in on this. I mean, you're going to have people living on top of people.
Yeah, the 2019 report evaluated some aerial photographs and parcel information and came up with a total of 464 lots up there. And they equated that to about 1,200 SFEs, given the typical distribution of residential units and larger density units for Big Sky. So it's a great question, and no matter what we say, we're probably going to be wrong, unfortunately. But this is kind of, at least we can get at a usage based on historical data and available space up there, and equating it to the single family equivalents that Big Sky typically uses.
The ultimate number is wrong, but it's in the right ballpark based on planning numbers
Mhm, sure.
GM work and all the previous studies you've all done. It's not outlandish, I guess I would say. It could happen. Whether or not it will is anybody's guess. And the filtration evaluation was also kick-started a bit by the Woodard and Kearns work a couple of years ago, where they piloted oxidation of the H2S and were unsure of whether it was going to make a particle or not, which is going to matter to DEQ, whether or not you want to filter downstream or not. That's where that came from, essentially. Now, like Ron's saying, you could treat this as essentially a full-scale pilot. None of these are going to harm public health, right? They're more nuisance issues. And as long as they work with you, you could just chlorinate, run it through Cascade, and see what the blended product looks like over time in terms of quality and whether or not you want to filter down the road would become more clear.
Another thing that could happen is by oxidizing down low, pumping it up, a lot of the oxidized contaminants could settle out to the upper tank.
Cascade tank.
Yep. And if you just raise the intake a couple feet, you got a nice kind of freeboard for accumulation, and that tank gets cleaned whatever 2-3 years anyway. Yeah, and the levels of contaminants we're looking at is a small amount of oxidized contaminants, so possibly avoid the filtration component.
I think the toughest trick of that is going to be control of what wells are coming online when.
Mm-hmm.
As long as there's enough blending, when you bring on a well that has H2S or one well that has some arsenic, there'd have to be some thought into making sure that when you bring on the well that has the nuisance issue, you have another well online that
doesn't,
issues,
yeah.
so that you're always blending it down.
They have to be almost linked. Like you have to run 5 with 8 or 6 with 3 or something like that.
That's pretty easy to set up a scale plan.
Yep.
Just a scripted VLAG, which we do for other reasons in microphone stations. That's fairly simple process.
So from here, the concept is we turn the PER in for ARPA funding. That was the primary goal. It's not miss out on having your hand out. And after talking to Ron and Jim, moving forward with splitting the system, chlorinating, that would be the bulk of the project. It's still a significant project. And based on round 1 of ARPA, you're only going to get $2 million if you do get money, so you still have $2 to $3 million of your own money to put in.
What's the timeline for successful and get that money to do it in January for years? No, what's the timeline to spend?
Well, you get the money awarded way before that.
Yeah.
I believe it's in 2024.
26, I think.
Yeah, 3 years to get that essentially.
2026. They'll end up extending that. They'll extend it because you can't get engineering, you can't get supply to build.
That was, we have a plan in place and started by that.
So Scott, if we are successful, we get 2 million and we proceed with alternate 2, what ballpark are we gonna need to pitch in on option 2 with the 2 million if we're fortunate enough to receive?
All 2 y'all see with the pipeline was, total project cost of $5 million. Is that on that last slide?
5.5.
Yeah, that's on slide 22. That's got the costs. So about $5.5 million for alternative 2 and about 12.1 million for the recommended alternative 3.3, that's filtration. But the 11.7 million is for the adage, specialized media, pressure filter, and the 12.4 is the dual media, conventional pressurized filter. So it was kind of interesting to see membrane filtration actually fall in the middle in terms of cost. But lion's share of the cost is the treatment building, and all the filtration technologies were around $500,000.
So this is a Cascade booster station up next to the Pinnacle condos. That building would go on that lot. It gets pretty tight with all this stuff up there. So a big driver and thinking of alternative too, obviously two things. This is a big one. The cost of this is double plus. Plus you gotta build a building to house all this gear, so it gets way more complicated.
If they move forward and you just maybe 2 million and another 3.5 you have to commit by 2026, let's say, and it's unsuccessful, you have to go to that third alternative. I mean, if alternative 2 does not satisfy all the, if the water treats to a certain level and so forth, are we obligated to go to 3?
Or keep punching wells.
Or keep punching wells.
Hope that.
Mine's worth more one way or the other. Trees we have are fine. But
it's actually could be committed to 12 as well.
At least you know what the cost is to maximize what you have.
right.
Yep.
Marginal.
But option 2 proves out what we can do with what we have. We don't know that yet. Quality of water. But, I'm saying, we are going to try to blend some existing wells, and how much treatment, how much turbidity we're going to cause.
Could look at it as you have $6 million improvements of existing wells and more exploratory drilling before you can say a lot of fish. Just done all 3.
Yeah,
that's the kind of deal that we're going to be looking for alternative wells regardless and all that. Anyways.
Okay.
We did, Jim and I briefly talked about revisiting with Mark and potentially some options to deepen some of the wells, given the success with well number 8. Kind of make some suggestions geologically that we deepen a couple of the wells, we might be able to arrive at some higher quality water. So that's potentially out there as well. Bank on it. Make some progress there as well, which would only reduce the demand for filtration.
And if you put the coring in now, split the system, you buy yourself some time to do those systems.
Yep.
And that's an important point, because by splitting the system, heard me say this enough, we are not able to maximize the water we have right now because the 2 systems are joined and linked, and we're doing the daisy chain pumping, which is necessary to operate the way we are. But once we are able to split them, and we're going to allow that, just to find them, use Cascade wells 5 and 6, then the 500 and some gallons a minute that we are using right now to supply everything goes to the Mountain Quarter Village in 1 stop instead of a 3-stop bus station. It's a 1 stop. So we can deliver in a 24-hour period so much more water. And that's really the operation. The running out of water is a daily concern in the high peak period. Even though you've got water in the wells, you've got to be able to get it into the distribution and pump it where it needs to go. This allows us to pump in 2 directions at the same time instead of getting in line and pumping like this, one behind each other. That's a huge operation improvement that both these options certainly are alternative to. That's my main goal. Obviously, supply over the long term is a big issue, but the immediate issue is to finally be able to release the potential of what we've had all these years. But the pumping constraint has kept us from being able to do that. So,
Well, I think you can release the potential, but you're going to get some squawks.
Going to get some
squawks.
Well,
anytime you mention chlorine, you got people that are going to be beating on your door.
The alternative is H2S, and that's what we've had. So.
Well, the alternative is no water.
Yeah. Other treatment alternatives too. Ozone doesn't provide any residual. So that was.
The point is, we need to be able to use another supply. The intention, the original, these systems, remember, they're designed as being separate systems to operate and serve 2 parts of the Mountain Village at the same time. And that's what we're trying.
However we get there, we gotta get there.
Did we ever pursue taking a look at manganese oxide on that well that had arsenic in it?
Yeah, that was part of the original audit study that Woodward incurred, which was a very extensive study. They were on site there for a month or so.
So the manganese oxide wasn't effective in removing arsenic because there's such low iron levels that there's nothing to co-precipitate that arsenic out. So while manganese oxide oxidizes it, then it needs a coagulant to precipitate still.
And to Peter's point, we didn't dig back up what oxidant to use. We wrote the coattails of that water current study from 2019.
I mean, that could be fairly interchangeable down the road.
But this is definitely a move in the right direction. And the fact that there's $2 million of ARPA money that could be kicked in on the project, whichever direction you go.
Yep, that's the main point. Is you need some more water now, and there was federal grant money passed around, so get your head out.
So do we have an action item on this?
No, not really. I mean, this is all informational on the PER. I mean, if somebody's got issues with the direction, yeah, chime in, but I think it's.
Do you mind going to the recommendation slide, Ron? So sorry for jumping in. This just relates to kind of what Ron was saying. And this is kind of what we see as the next steps are to proceed with alternative 2 and apply for round 2 of competitive ARPA funding. And this will serve as a, serve to buy more time as a potential interim phase to alternative 3. And also see what the characteristics of the blended water quality are like. And while proceeding with alternative 2, the district can continue to investigate additional source wells and maximize existing wells as part of that pilot study. And alternative 3 may be needed, which is the full treatment system of oxidation, coagulation, filtration, and disinfection if no additional wells are found, or if new wells have similar water quality issues. If you all agree with this approach, then we would recommend moving forward with RFQ for final design as soon as possible, just because of the ARPA scheduling requirements that were discussed earlier.
Well, part of that was, originally Jim would like to start construction this summer. Don't have to necessarily, just need to make it through the season before you have. But you could RFQ this. Either wait and see if ARPA awards you the money, but you still need to do the project ultimately. So RFQ and the final design work.
And so your RFQ for final design, then we'll find out how much the cost is going to be for final design. Do you have a ballpark estimate?
Yeah, Tom, for ballpark, we always use 10-12% of construction. So I would think of that 5 million, Kelsey, what was construction roughly? Probably 4, something like that.
So the of the 5.4, about 817,000 is engineering, and about and about something. Well,
that's all right. So the 800 was probably engineering plus construction admin.
yeah, and then about 1.5 million for construction, in mobilization and overhead and profit and contingency on top of the work and equipment.
Well, Ron, are we gonna have to do this regardless of ARPA money?
Yeah, we need to, there's a few things we need to do. We need to build a dedicated pipeline to the Cascade tank, regardless of how this turns out with ARPA. Completion of well 8 to add an additional well source into the mountain system needs to happen. So yeah, there's a lot of this that's gonna have to happen.
Well, from what I see from these recommendations, there's only one action item. That's number 4 is, do we ask for a quote at this point in time for final design?
Well, Tom, if I could, I think the best thing we could have come out of this meeting would be for the district to say, we generally agree that, alternative 2 is what you want to recommend in that EDR that's going to get turned in on January 14th, and then we would stamp that.
I think alternative 2 makes a lot of sense simply because you can always add advanced filtration later on, right?
Right.
So
My recommendation is alternative 2. I think Jim agrees with that.
going a somewhat conservative approach makes sense now, and we have the option to expand it later.
Right, exactly.
Sounds like a no-brainer.
Tom, I'll make a motion that we do just as you said, proceed with alternative 2, move forward with RFQ.
We have a motion by Dick. We have a second.
I'll second.
I think Mike Wilcynski beat you, Mike Duquesnoy.
Oh, that's fine.
We'll call that good.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Is there any change in the award based on the amount of the ask? We asked for the 11 million versus asking for the. It's kind of $2 million is what they give.
In fact, we're gonna reduce our ask to $2 million because round 1, the max they gave out was $2 million per project. Yeah. And we had asked for the full thing. They're not likely to deviate from that path that they've already set for themselves. So we see it as kind of pointless to be in for 5.4 again.
Sure.
Knowing they're gonna award $2 million.
But they're not gonna award us 30% of the ask or something like that.
I mean, we don't think so.
They would have a big battle on their hands, I think, of people saying, wait a second, round 1 is $2 million for, 4 projects? And well, we're out of the running on this project.
Right.
But our rate was 115, which would put us in the queue for an award, even if we weren't doing the PDR 30%.
I think there's a lot of.
This helps our score.
Upsides, not just to district, but globally from this project, so. Seems to make sense.
Now Terry just says to find 2.4 million somewhere for us.
See?
Well, I mean,
SRF. Well, yeah,
That would be a number that SRF could deal with at this point.
We know that SRF's the likely source of that. But then you're into bond stuff and it's a slow process. And then what kind of bond? Is it the general obligation revenue bond? Same bureau we've been through.
We've asked Grab to give some ballpark numbers on what this means in terms of rates as well. Various projects.
Scott, Ryan and I did go through the exercise. Alternative 2, you are looking at potentially $8 per user and an increase in rates.
In phase?
Depending on inflation rate.
Per quarter?
I think that's per month. That's assuming.
That's we voted on this motion.
We haven't yet.
No.
We're in discussion.
All right, any other discussion? If not, I'll open it up for public comment.
Yeah, I was gonna say, who's left?
Bill, nothing. Chris Leonard.
Yeah, I'm looking.
Not hearing any public comment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Passes unanimously.
Hey, Tom, just one comment that I've taken away from this whole discussion. We don't have any more water on the mountain to fund 2,600 or so SFEs or doors down in the Lone Moose Meadow area.
That's true.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for bearing through that with us. It's complicated.
All right, moving right along to District Ordinance 97-1001.
Couple things real quick. Under legal, I put a copy of the judge's order, and it's the same one I emailed you last Friday. I did a meeting, a conference meeting with John Roshway and Susan this morning. That part about meeting with the board is not accurate. They don't need to meet with the board right now. There's a meeting with the judge January 3rd, and that will happen. They've got to put another brief forward, so you can just ignore that. We don't need to figure out a board meeting time between now and there. And then under the employee succession planning, in my report, or in the board packet, the committee asked us to look at, organizationally, how should things look going forward. So we've thrown together some different options and ideas on maybe what the district will look like in the future as far as staffing. I need to go over this with our staff too, but I talked to Grantham about this. He was suggesting this piece right here. What I'd like to do is do another committee meeting, subcommittee meeting, go through some of this stuff. I reached out to a couple of our GO candidates who are still interested. I explained the busyness with Big Sky and all things. We haven't done any interviews yet, but they're on board to do those shortly after the first year. So, but we need to think about scheduling another subcommittee meeting. So we'll figure that out away from this meeting. Yeah, okay. And then,
how long do you think those guys will stay on the line as far as availability of those resumes we're sitting on?
The two I'm communicating with, they're fine right now. Some of the others, I'm not sure, Mike. But we need to start doing some interviews, and we'll start that up after the first of the year. And one thing, Scott's kind of helped with some of this stuff too. They're going to be working for Estes Park, Colorado. Estes Park is similar to Big Sky, big in size maybe. We do more with less people, so to speak, but they've got an assistant manager, an operations person, and we talked about that a little bit. So what the final outlook looks like, I don't know yet, but we'll talk about it. And then the ordinance 97-101, I emailed Susan kind of outlining some of the things that I need to think that would happen with that document that you moved into the resolution. Some of it I'm proposing just to delete outright. We have not met yet to do that, and we will do that after the holidays to have something in front of the board for the January meeting. So you passed first reading at the last one, rather than have you pass second reading just to have it totally overhauled. I decided to wait, not to have it on the agenda till we get it in the form for the second reading. It'll require 3 readings by doing that, which is fine. But So we'll work on that. There's no action, nothing in front of the board for this meeting. New developments, phase 8B. I don't know if Olson's still on the meeting, but I got a letter from Eli at Morrison, Maryland. It's in the board packet. So phase 8B is basically an extension of the Highlands. It's one big condominium parcel, 12 single-family condo units. These are single-family lots down here. So it's different in that it's going to be condo development. The density is relatively low at an acre per unit, is low in my opinion, but so they're asking for a capacity letter for this, which will go to the state. And the engineers use 86 gallons per day per SFE, which they've used historically for years. And we're into this difference between what DEQ thinks we need to be doing and what they've used historically. DEQ would say you gotta use 107.3 gallons per day per SFE. But we probably need to evaluate the year end, what that number looks like, and that's Scott and I will take a look at that, because that number arguably can be changed based on data that you got, so. What's that? John's not. And we're coming up on year end, so we'll have the whole calendar year of flow to the plant. We've got our new permit total, so we'll kick that can a little bit to see if we can make a case, and the numbers could go the other direction too, it could go up. So, but we need to look at that, so. So that one is new. The permits down to 102. Nothing really to talk about there. And then this one I did want to talk about. I included this in the board packet. So Sarah Gaither from the food bank reached out to me at one of the meetings I was at. And they're interested in partnering with us on this low income assistance program that the state is putting together for water and sewer payments for low income folks. And they must have federal dollars or state grant money in this thing. You basically put an application forward to qualify as an entity to even get potential money from that. I told her I would bring it up in a board meeting, see if there was support to pursue something like this. We've never had any kind of low income assistance program in our history. That's not to say we can't get into one, but so it runs from fall of 2021. So it's short-lived. Based on the economy, though, I can see them potentially extending that. So if it's something you think is worth pursuing, we can make the application and at least qualify the district to be in the program.
Well, it's not requiring any of our funds, is it?
No, it delays our money a little bit, getting payment, but you eventually get that. So I don't think it's a hit to revenue necessarily, and we certainly have the revenue base. We can weather that, the delays you get, Matt. I don't know, Terry, if you got any strong feelings about it either way.
No, if we have members of our community that will qualify for that, I think we should put it on the table for them.
And I think we will. I mean, I sit in these big meetings with these large groups with resort tax, and they're talking about 15 families that are living in their car in Big Sky. So we're new territory with this place that I've never seen before. We used to have a few.
I think we should pursue it. Do we need a motion to do that, or are you guys just good to do that under general business?
No, I think a motion would be useful to document our decision moving forward.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the low-income assistance.
I'll make that motion, not just a stipulation there, or can we stipulate that those that receive assistance have to be within tier 1 of the water usage?
No, boy.
So, this is Susan, and I looked at these contracts on behalf of the city of Three Forks, and, there's a whole section on how much they pay. So that assistance program is up to a certain amount. So if you had somebody who was exceeding the usages or there were issues, then the user would still be responsible to the district for the balance. But it is that program fits really well with what we do.
That would just be a shame that.
Yeah. We have a motion for Peter Manka. Do we have a second?
I'll second it, Tom.
Dick Fast seconds. Is there any further discussion?
The only comment I would have is we ought to make sure that it doesn't create a huge workload for our people.
I'm gonna let Sarah do the work. Or try to. No, I think it'd be a good partnership to work with the food bank on. And if it becomes burdensome, we'll let you know.
Good.
Any other comments? If not, I'll open it up for public comment. Not really anticipating any, so I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
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 Susan, did Three Forks do this?
Yeah, they did.
Those
Actually, through the I got the wrong acronyms, but through the state, the billing is actually just as simple as when you send it out to clients. So it didn't add any workload on the administrative end to the city staff.
Good. And Tom, I interrupted your vote.
I just wanted to finish the, I was going to ask for if there were any nays. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right, the other thing I had reported on was this Trail Ranch project. We were a contributing partner to this. We gave money for the project. It's actually turned out really well. You know, they did that big garden over there. Jen Muller put out their annual report on it. She really did a nice job with this. We're recognized as a partner in this. Somewhere in here, right here. So, you know, I think we did this 4 years ago, 3 years ago, but it's really proved to be a pretty interesting project and a successful one. And then I had a number of articles, just FYI, assume you guys see most of this. This one's one that Scott knows well.
As well as it can be known, it's just still in flux in terms of what Montana's gonna do for surface water discharges.
The standards for permits, they're reviewing all that.
So,
Wastewater.
I don't even remember seeing that in the IR.
Yeah, it was a pretty extensive article.
Well done. Give you a good overview.
Yeah, I read it, Bill. It's confusing.
Well, Montana's at a very critical point in its whole approach to how surface discharge permits are reviewed and approved and the standards that are going to be applied to those permits. And you're on the committee.
Yeah, we're working on a framework for release in the summer of how the reg would actually be implemented. But it's still very much up in the air and could end up back in court very
Could.
Good luck with that, Scott, because I don't know how you're going to do this.
right. It's it's a narrative nutrient limit, which is in the 1980s era style of permitting. The DEQ wants to set the narrative based on quantitative numbers for algae. And it's going to be very confusing, and they're getting pushback on it. And the conservation groups don't feel like it moves the needle fast enough on discharges. And there's nobody's happy right now.
Okay, Ron, and that,
We can all
that
thank the
other,
mining community for that.
What's that, Mike?
We can all thank the mining community for that.
Right.
hey, Ron, on that other article, I'm skeptical of where that picture was taken of the algae. It looks like moss growing in a spring creek.
I'm skeptical of a lot of that stuff as well. This one?
Yeah, go down to that picture. Or you don't have it in there.
That's our ponds, it looks like. But
I'm with you, Dick. I saw that picture and it looked like it was from Miles City or something.
Yeah, or, a spring creek, you get moss growing on the side. The algae thing, you go upstream from here and there's algae in that water.
correct. Yeah, it goes up past Taylor's Fork.
It goes up in the Taylor Fork, yeah. In the Taylor Fork too, so anyway.
Yeah.
We're getting beat up on that one. I don't think it's valid.
Listen, before we get to a motion for adjourn, I need some help. My hot tub is blowing apart. My wife is jumping up and down. I don't even know who repairs hot tubs.
Here's your guy right here.
Where?
Right here.
God damn, I've lost your telephone number. I'm going over and sit by you.
I don't have a house company anymore.
I know you gave me the name.
You get that figured out. But I think we so I got our next meeting January 28th, which should work for folks. 18. Or excuse me, January 18th, third Tuesday, that should work.
What day?
January 18th is kind of.
As long as it's not January 8th, I'm good.
What's going on then?
Hey, how are you on a charter to Frisco, Mike?
Nah, I bought all the tickets on when we won the quarterfinal game. That's how optimistic I was.
Well, I'm kind of tired of watching the Cats play North Dakota State myself.
That'd be a good football game.
It's gonna be good.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move it.
Joe Shropshire moves. And a
Second.
Dick Fast seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.